I never realized how horrible my boundaries were until I became a mom. And it kind of goes back to that, like once you have children, your priorities just shift so much and they're like a little flashlight or mirror that like hones in on all these areas that you probably just buried right in the back of your mind and now they're all coming out. And then that's when you start to realize, wow, I really need to set some boundaries here so that I can be in a good, healthy mental state with everyone around me.
You're listening to episode number 93 of the MomTalks with Christa podcast. I'm your host, Christa. Thanks for joining me this week, guys. I hope you're having a great week so far. We have another amazing episode for you today. I have Karissa Whitman here today from the account Mom After Baby, and we'll get to her episode very shortly. But we are talking about the importance of setting, honoring, and holding boundaries. And if you know me and you know and you listen to things I talk about, I am big on boundaries because as someone who was I'm going to say former people pleaser, boundaries are hard. And so I think for a lot of women, I think it is really hard. So we talk about that, but I will get to that very shortly. So just some updates for you guys. Last week, we had our World Breastfeeding Week giveaway. The month of August is World Breastfeeding Month. So if you missed it, there's still going to be lots of fun things going on this month for you. But last week we gave out over 40 prizes to 15 different winners. And I just always love World Breastfeeding Week because we always like to do a big giveaway at the same time sharing what World Breastfeeding Week is and World Breastfeeding Month is all about, just spreading awareness of it and not just the highlights, but showing what really goes into it, that it's not easy for everyone. And that whether you breastfed for a day, a week, 6 months, a year, it's all worth celebrating because that's a lot on your body. That is a full-time job for a lot of moms is breastfeeding. I mean, the time and the hours that go into that is sometimes goes unnoticed. So this is to acknowledge all of you guys and the work that you're doing and that it's amazing work. So this is to all you moms, whether you are exclusively pumping, nursing, a little mix of both, or you're a formula mom, it's all hard work. And so no matter how long you breastfed or nursed for, you get props to you because it's not easy. So this whole month, like I said, is World Breastfeeding Awareness Month. And the last week of August, starting August 25th, is Black Breastfeeding Week. And so we're going to be sharing some more educational posts highlighting Black breastfeeding communities as well, so you can get involved, see how you can support them as well, and learn more about it. Just because you missed last week, or if you missed last week, don't worry, we got lots of educational things coming for you this month because that's our goal, is just to educate and make everyone more aware of things. And I want the women that listen to this to be proud too. Be proud of how far you have come in your mothering journey, breastfeeding journey, wherever you're currently at. And yeah, thanks for hanging out with us during this month. It's a fun month for sure. Lots we can always learn and bring more awareness to. Next week on the 18th, we have our next peanut pod. This one is called Dealing with Loneliness. Let's talk. I just saw a statistic that about 90% of moms report feeling lonely since having children. So I think it's extremely important to connect on these feelings, to maybe talk with others and understand that you aren't alone in these feelings. And I think connecting with others, venting and sharing what you're going through can help you not feel so alone. So if you want to join me on that, find my group on the Peanut app, Mom Talks with Christa, and you'll get access to all my upcoming events. We do them on the first and third Thursday of every month at 1 p.m. Central. And if you're not yet signed up for the newsletter, or Mommy Knows Best newsletter updates, go ahead and sign up, the link in the bio. You'll also get a nice little bonus when you sign up, so do that. But we send out monthly newsletters. We send out event updates. We send out product launches. Guys, you will be the first to know if you're on our list. And we always do something really special for people on our list. You know, we'll get like messages and stuff like, oh, when's this coming? Or are you guys gonna have something like this? If you're on our list, you might know first. Get on our list to know about giveaways, all that good stuff, things coming up in the future. That's where we send everything first. And in addition to all of that, you'll get notified of our roster of resources that are just beneficial to all parents. So we always share different experts, we share different links, videos, interviews, all that good stuff. All right, and back to Mom Talks. So next week we have Dr. Karissa Whitman talking about body positivity. And I think this is a really great episode because we really talk about how our words about our own body can reflect onto our children or younger minds around us. And so with body positivity, it has a positive influence on those young minds around us. So she shares exactly how to do that, how to be more conscious of our words. It kind of goes back to last week's with Christa Heitzma, the parenting coach, about breaking, I'm going to say it the right way, breaking cycles to help future generations. So if your generation talked a lot, or your parents' generation talked a lot about like, oh, get the fat-free food because you don't want fat in your foods. And so you are consciously like looking for fat, and then you find yourself saying that in front of your kids. It's almost like, wait a second, being more conscious of how you treat yourself and what kind of foods you allow yourself to eat, and in turn affecting your kids, if that makes sense. So it's all about breaking that generational cycle, so it can be more positive, so you and your children can feel better about themselves, your bodies, and not be so judgmental on your bodies, especially like postpartum. We are so judgmental on our own bodies, that we, this bounce back culture out there that, after you have a baby, you have to immediately shrink back up and look how you did pre-baby. It's not going to happen. So we need to let go of these unrealistic expectations and take care of our bodies. And that's going to have a positive effect on children around us. All right. That's all I got. I'm going to make it so I'm not doing such a long spiel this morning, but it's time now for today's episode, which is Karissa Whitman. And I'll talk about that in her intro. But we talk about boundaries, and this cannot be talked about enough. Like I said, I love talking about boundaries because I think so many of us have a hard time with boundaries. And you'll even see that this week's MomTale question has to do with boundaries too. It's a good one. I have Karissa Whitman here from Mom After Baby. And after her own struggles through postpartum, not feeling like she had enough support, not feeling good about herself, she created a resource for all moms to go to feel supported, to feel like a community, and so much more. We talk about the importance of setting boundaries and understanding your own boundaries and learning to love yourself, something I'm so passionate about. So it was just a great conversation. Really love talking with Karissa. And of course, stick around at the very end for our MomTales of the week. This is when we read your responses to our questions we put on social media. And this is a really good one. So stick around for that one. And without further ado, here's my interview with Karissa Whitman from Mom After Baby. Hi, Karissa. How are you?
Good. How are you, Krista? Our names are so similar.
I know. It's one of those like tongue twisters almost, Karissa and Christa. And I interviewed
Yeah.
Crystal earlier. I'm like, there's just very similar names. Well, thanks for coming on. I'm so excited to talk to you. And we're going to talk about a lot of important topics for moms. So before we get started, can you just tell us a little bit about you and who you are and what you do, and we'll go from there.
Most of my followers know me as Mom After Baby. I'll talk a little bit about that in a second, but outside of that, I am a mom to 2 young toddlers. They're both boys. My oldest is on the spectrum. My husband is a firefighter, so we kind of were in that like really busy, always something going on stage of life, whether like the husband's at work or the kids have, preschooler events going on. And then we also have 2 big dogs. So they're also like very much a part of our family. So there's always something going on here in this house. Something that a lot of people probably don't know about me is that my professional background is actually in veterinary medicine. So I went to college, I got my degree in animal science, and I thought I was going to work in the veterinary field pretty much for the rest of my life. I worked my way up pretty quickly to a leadership role, and then found myself getting pretty burnt out And that was right around the time where we were like talking about starting a family. And so I made the really hard decision to leave my career and pretty much leave everything that I had worked for. So that way we can start focusing more on starting a family. After my first was born, I had a really rough postpartum stage, like postpartum depression, anxiety, breastfeeding struggles, like you name it. And that is kind of what started my site now, which is Mom After Baby. It it was an outlet for me originally, to have a place to like journal and talk about what I was going through. And from there, I made a lot of connections with moms, and I started to see that there was this really big gap in the preparation and the education for preparing for those, areas that so many women struggle with.
Mhm.
Because I remember for me, like I felt so alone. I felt like nobody understood, and so it kind of like sparked the thought for me to turn this into something where I can give back and help, because that's what I love to do. That's why I got into the field of working with animals in the first place. And yeah, I have Mom After Baby now, and I'm so proud of of how far that has come and where it started.
Oh, I love that. I love hearing about like people's kind of journey stories of like how they got into the business they are. And like, I would say like 80% of the people I interview, they saw their lives going a completely different way. And then once they had kids, they kind of like were like, oh, there's a gap here. There's a need here and I'm gonna fulfill it. And so
Yeah.
that's so cool to be able to be like, okay, I was through it this way and I don't want anyone to have to experience that. So I'm going to help other moms.
Yeah.
That's awesome. And I know, so one of the big things we want to talk about, and you talked about like protecting yourself kind of postpartum and different, postpartum health and depression, anxiety. And to kind of go along with that and like being your best self, we want to talk about boundaries and setting boundaries. We get so many questions on like how to do this, especially as a new mom, maybe in a vulnerable state and thinking like, oh, I should accept help or I should say yes to people. So what are your tips for setting boundaries? And when it comes time for it, how do you stick to it?
And it's funny because for me, like, I never realized how horrible my boundaries were until I became a mom. And it kind of goes back to that. Like, once you have children, your priorities just shift so much. And they're like a little flashlight or mirror that like hones in on all these areas that you probably just buried right in the back of your mind. And now they're all coming out. And then that's when you start to realize, wow, I really need to set some boundaries here so that I can be in a good, healthy mental state with everyone around me. And so I really like to think of boundaries as a necessary act to maintain relationships, whether it's, work related, family related, with your partner, even with your children. And so the things that I like to do now is I really like to practice saying no
Mm.
to anything that just doesn't serve you, or even if you just don't want to do it, like really be mindful and get in that habit of practicing to say no. Because I think a lot of us don't really realize how much of a yes person we really are
Mhm.
until you have kids and you're like, oh, I can't say yes anymore. Like I have to
Mhm.
care for my baby. Something else that I really like to do is journal. So, when I was going through postpartum depression and anxiety, one of the tactics that we did was just journaling what feelings came up when certain areas were triggering. And these were all around like boundary work. And it really helped me kind of hone in on where I was struggling to set boundaries, but why I was struggling as well, like what my past was carrying that I just didn't necessarily realize.
Mhm.
And that's really great work to do if you are in therapy or if you're thinking about going to therapy. I always encourage people to look into that and just start practicing that acknowledgement piece, because that's kind of always where you start, is acknowledging and then working towards formulating a plan to reshift that thought process. But yeah, I would say if you also realize that you're burning out often, if you feel like you are always being taken advantage of, if you feel like you have no time for yourself and you can't fit anything in, like literally nothing into your day, those are pretty clear signs that you probably have some poor boundaries going on that really should be addressed for your mental health and so you can show up for your family as well.
Yeah, those are great tips. I think definitely looking inward and being like, okay, what kind of makes me unhappy right now, or where do I feel taken advantage of? Because like you
Yeah.
said, I think a lot of times we don't even realize that our boundaries are being crossed because maybe we haven't fully addressed our boundaries or like laid them out. Like, okay, I don't like when this happens, or I don't want to say yes to that anymore because I think we're just used to being yes people. Like, oh, I don't
Yes.
need boundaries. I'm good.
Yeah.
Yeah, so I think that happens a lot. But like, so what are your recommendations for, okay, so like someone disrespecting a boundary? So like, have you personally had someone disrespect a boundary, and how did you then recognize that, and how did you go to the next step of being like, okay, this person disrespected my boundary, now this is what's going to happen?
Sure. And that's a good question because I think that comes up for so many of us. But when I first started learning how to set boundaries, like my boundaries were not clear at all. And that's kind of where those loopholes came in, where I like to view them as boundary violators, right? That's where like our chronic boundary violators will swoop in and they will just disrespect your boundaries. They don't see your values as important to them, and it has nothing to do with you. It's completely on them. But when you're not clear with your boundaries, meaning what you need as well as the consequence, then it really opens that door for people to just kind of be like, "Oh, okay, whatever, I don't, they're not serious, or I don't need to take them serious." So the one thing that has helped me specifically is to really get clear on my boundary as well as the consequence. I'm trying to think like a specific instance. We have a family member who will usually, comment on whether it's like political debates or your weight or just anything that's kind of controversial that isn't a positive conversation to have at events. And so we really had to get clear on the boundary of like, hey, we love when you're here. We don't get to see you often. However, if these things keep popping up and they just really take a negative tone at the event, we're probably going to have to consider taking you off of the invite list.
Mhm.
And so after that, it was like a dramatic difference. There was no kickback. It was taken pretty well. And I'm assuming maybe they had their own feelings about it, but it never came out. And so I've just found that getting really clear has been really helpful. And if you're finding your boundaries are being pushed very often, I would encourage people to really look at like what does your boundaries look like and where can you get a little bit more clear with those consequences of what you are and aren't willing to tolerate.
Yeah, that's a great point because I think a lot of times we think we make them clear, like maybe by being a certain, like I'm speaking of myself, like I know like in the past, like, like I'll be a certain way, like if someone's kind of crossing a boundary that maybe I haven't even said, but I act more like annoyed. So I'm like, oh, it should be obvious to them.
Yeah.
And then,
Yeah.
later you look inward and you're like, have I ever actually told them like, I don't like to be called at this time in the morning, or I don't, certain things like that. And it's like
Yeah.
just being clear with communication is going to go a long way.
100%. I mean, I use that even with my kids, like, that is a tactic when we're talking about certain things, whether that are safety or, you can use this toy when your brother's done, but you definitely cannot push him, like, your hands need to stay to yourself? So getting really clear is helpful in so many ways, even with our kids.
I know you kind of talked about the reason you started Mom After Baby was because of your own postpartum experience. So I kind of want to talk about that a little bit more. Like, what was your experience like? And I mean, I'm sure that's a loaded question. I'm sure there's like
Yeah.
so much to it, but like the certain parts of it that you kind of felt, and you said you felt lonely or anxiety. So what were those parts that you really that you're now kind of working to help other moms in?
It's crazy because I have 2 boys and, like, my postpartum experiences were night and day different from one another. But with the first one, it was just crazy from our labor experience up until when he was born because he went straight to the NICU. And,
Mhm.
like, I remember that first minute of loneliness really set in when I finally gave birth to him, and then he was rushed off to the NICU, and it's just me and the doctor sitting in the OR, like dead silence, no conversations going on. And I was like, oh my gosh, is this what it's supposed to feel like becoming a mom, you know? And that's kind of where it started, but I didn't really realize that that's where things started for me personally. Like I kind of just brushed them off, got through the day, and then later these things kind of started coming out when we started experiencing other struggles.
Mm,
Like it literally felt like we just had a string of bad luck of breastfeeding. He had a lip and tongue tie.
mm,
He had a repair that was done like horrendously through a doctor that we had to get revised at a pediatric dentist. Like
mm,
back to back things kept going on. And that's kind of the area where I focus on through my site is getting yourself prepared, not necessarily for everything, but preparing for some of the common challenges. That way, when they do arise, or if you did have an experience like me where it's back to back to back things, you're equipped with resources and tools and support to help you get through those. And that's what I did not have. I didn't have much of a strong support system outside of my husband. I had no idea that there was like actual perinatal mental health specialists out there. I didn't realize I could seek lactation support outside of what our insurance offered. So when they were giving us horrible advice of like, just keep trying, you're doing fine, you know, really there was something more going on that was getting missed. So those are all the areas that I really focus on through my site is you don't have to settle for going through this alone, and there are ways to prepare and there are resources out there that can be helpful for you.
That's amazing because I think there's that connotation of like, oh, look, she can do it all, like super mom, like she's amazing. And it's great, like everyone wants to be called super mom, know that you
Yeah.
can do things, but it's also okay to ask for help and know that there's, resources out there because, they always say like it takes a village because it actually
Yeah,
does, you
it
need that
does.
support and you need that time to like chill out too and have downtime for yourself.
Yeah. And I mean, even like doctor care, you know, you go to the doctors and they're so reassuring. They're like, you're doing a good job. This is normal. But there's that line of like, okay, well, how much of this is normal and how much of this should I actually be seeking a little bit more help for, you know?
Hmm. Yeah, there's definitely that. I've noticed it with some doctors before where it's like you're almost like asking them for help, but then and it's not like they're like belittling it, but in a
Yeah.
way they kind of are dismissing. They're just like,
Yeah.
yeah, it's fine. Like you're good. You're on the right track.
Yeah.
And it's like that's not what I want to hear right now.
Yeah. Yeah, totally. You're like, thank you, but I think I need a little more help. I'm not sure.
Yeah.
That's why I'm asking you.
Right. Are we all just supposed to feel this like exact way?
Yeah.
Okay. When it came to your postpartum experience, were there certain things that you had to like, I know you were talking about all the different resources. Were there certain things that you had to relearn or train yourself on as you're kind of going through them, whether that's, taking care of yourself or parenting or asking for help, like just different things like that that you had to kind of like step back and like kind of, yeah, retrain yourself on?
Yeah, I mean, the one thing that really pops out to me is expectations, expecting myself to like jump into this whole motherhood thing and get everything right on the first try. That was a huge thing that I really had to take a step back and like shift my expectations big time, especially because my partner went back to work around the 5 to 6 week mark. So as a firefighter, he's gone for sometimes 1 to 3 days at a time, having pretty minimal support to where it was just me and still like a pretty young baby trying to figure things out on our own. And for some reason, I had these expectations that like he would be sleeping on a schedule and we would be going to the grocery store and he would never cry and all these things would work out a certain way. And like when, you know, they didn't go according to plan, it was so, I guess in a sense, triggering for me to be like, "Oh my gosh, what's going on? What am I doing wrong? Where am I failing? Why am I not getting this right?"
Mm,
And those thoughts were very, very overwhelming for me and left me feeling like I was a crummy mom who, you know, couldn't figure things out, when in reality, it was just a normal part of learning that I really needed to slow down and give myself grace to figure out and realize, "Hey, if he's crying and he just needs some snuggles, and he's not going to get his nap on schedule today, like that's okay. You're not breaking your baby, if they don't follow that schedule perfectly. You're not doomed for like horrible sleep for the rest of your life and things like that. So I would say really setting realistic expectations and accepting those was a huge thing that I had to relearn. And it's carried on so much, throughout the rest of our journey.
That's amazing to be able to kind of look on the outside and be like, okay, like I'm getting through each day, baby's healthy, I'm good,
Yeah.
like, and kind of be like, you know what, every day doesn't have to go perfect, doesn't have to go according to this schedule every day. It doesn't, I'm not a bad mom. Or I was just talking, I just did an interview about kind of like parent with the parenting coach, and she was kind of talking about how like a lot of times it's like our own like when something doesn't go according to plan, it's more about like our own like expectation and us getting mad or like embarrassed thinking that we're not a good like mom because we did
Yeah.
something, when in reality it's like you can't always control every part of every day.
Exactly. Yeah. I mean, it doesn't help. I'm like a total type A plan person. So I really had to learn how to shift those things. And I'm grateful that motherhood brought that out. I don't know that I would have really realized it the way that I did had I not had children. So it was hard, but I'm so grateful for it.
So how did you learn to love yourself through your postpartum journey, and how can you encourage other moms that are listening right now that are in that time where they're like hating their bodies, hating like just not liking themselves right now, or just going through this hard time where it's like this big change? How did you find that love? I mean, I know I always say self-love is a journey. It's not like you flipped
Yeah.
on a like a switch
Yeah.
and you're good. I mean, obviously it's every day you kind of work at it, but how were you able to kind of grow through that journey and find that?
I think you nailed it, when you said it's not a switch you flip on. It really is this unlinear journey, just like motherhood in a sense. And what really stood out to me, and I just made an Instagram post about this actually, was I was so hyper focused on trying to bounce back to my old self. Even through pregnancy, I remember thinking, okay, after the baby's born, I'll get back in the gym,
Mm.
I'll have time for these hobbies. And it was a big shift again of like expectations of not focusing on needing to bounce back to be anybody else than who I was in that moment. And also being able to see the growth that was ahead and like lean into that to be able to see what those doors had in store for me. And so once I saw that, there was more in front of me than I was trying to pull back to. It kind of just helped me let go of those expectations of like, I don't need to return to who I was pre-baby. Like there's parts of that person that are still here now, but I want to show my kids the importance of me being able to be present and not letting my expectation of I need to get back to someone else hold me back from being in that moment with my kids and with my family.
Mm.
That was a big thing for me. Was I felt like for a little while it was, I don't want to say like controlling my life, but it was definitely impacting things where I'm like, okay, I don't want to go to the beach today because I don't like how I look, or I don't want to, go to this event because people might judge me. And it's like, okay, where I'm unhappy, that shouldn't dictate, my happiness to show up for my family. And when it's getting to that point, then I really need to change something.
Yeah, it's almost like that. It's almost like that phrase of like, I'll be happy when, or
Yeah.
I'll do this when. And it's like, as a mom, it's like you kind of already enter this new stage, and there's that mourning process of who you were, before kids or what happened before. And it's kind of like learning to accept this, new chapter, and being able to like love yourself in the new chapter almost.
Yeah. And I mean, every day is different. Like you might wake up some days and you're just not feeling it, and that's fine. I think allowing yourself to feel those feelings and then move on from them and like keep going forward is the key instead of holding back.
And so what tips or what techniques do you have along the way? So for those days that you're not like feeling your best, like you said, like maybe you wake up and you're like, it's a crummy day and I'm just gonna let it be a crummy day. What are your tips for those days, or just kind of in your self-love journey for kind of guiding yourself along?
I really like leaning into affirmations, whether they're like I have a little book of affirmations and I also like to journal my own. So if it's something where I'm waking up and I'm like, oh man, yesterday was crazy with the kids, my husband's still at work, we have all these things today, I might note something in my journal when I wake up, like you can do hard things. This will not last forever, and just like
Mhm.
really lean into empowering myself to get through that day. That would be probably the biggest thing that sets me up for the day. And then carving out little bits of time. Like, I am not someone that does these massive, big self care type events because of how busy and hectic our lives are. So I make do with like 5 minutes a day, whether it's stepping outside, taking some breath, listening to my favorite song, with an AirPod in while I'm cooking dinner, and really taking advantage of like every small minute that I can to just kind of reground myself to get through that.
I love that. I think regrounding is the most amazing. It's like weird. It's like when you break it down, it's so simple, but sometimes, in the hustle and bustle of life, it's so hard to remember, like, okay, let me just take a second and like feel like the breeze outside. And it's such like
Yeah.
an amazing grounding technique just to like feel. I heard this thing too where like a lot of times like earth signs are more in tune with like put your feet in the dirt or
Yeah.
feel the actual ground, and it can help you. And that like changed my life. Yeah, so that's amazing. Those are really helpful tips. We kind of alluded to this earlier about, entering a new chapter and kind of looking back and like almost like mourning who you were, or like looking back
Yeah.
and being like, oh, like I'm in this new stage and I don't really like my body yet. So how how can women listening grow, and how do you like grow to accept changes in your life? Like as we hit new chapters or things come that we didn't plan for, how can we kind of move through them easier?
I mean, I'll be the first to admit, like, I hate big changes. That's just a natural part of like being that type A person that I am. It like throws off my plan and my schedule. But I've learned to take almost like accountability of being aware. So being aware when I'm feeling overwhelmed by change, being aware if I am, acting out a certain way because of it. And that's always that first step for me to be like, okay, I need to I need to take 5 minutes. I need to lean into these feelings. That way I can move past them. And so that's
Mhm.
been really helpful for me, is like really being hyper aware of what's going on, whether it's emotionally, physically, what those stressors kind of feel like. That way I can lean into them, feel them, and then I can let them go and move forward.
Awesome. Yeah, leaning into them is huge. Like I think our generation are kind of like when we grew up, it was kind of like get over your sadness
Yeah.
quickly, like move on, like come on, let's all be happy all the time. And there's so much power into leaning into emotions, leaning into how you feel, leaning into new changes and trying to see the light at the end of the tunnel, I think. So
Yeah.
yeah, that's a great point.
Yeah, I love that. My friend Brianna, she runs the page Conscious Mommy. She always says like what gets repressed will get expressed. And I always hear her voice like if there's anything
Mm.
stressful, I'm being like, don't repress this. You need to lean into it. You need to feel it, and then we need to move on from it.
I love that. That's amazing. And so talking a little bit more about like mom after baby. So what kind of like courses do you offer? What does your page offer for new moms? How can moms kind of get that support and resources from you?
So most of my content is on my website, which is momafterbaby.com. It is free content from, how to uh, bust a breastfeeding clog, how to prepare for postpartum and literally make a postpartum plan, how to get your partner involved and on board so that way they're educated about some of the changes you might be going through. Completely free content that you could read on there. I have a couple of little workbooks that you can also access through that website if you wanted more of a paid thing that has it broken down and a little bit more organized in one place. And then I also share a lot of that content on my Instagram as well, which is at mom.afterbaby. Since someone took mom after baby and it's never been used, but I can't get the handle. So
Well, good to know. I know it's hard when it's like a difference of like one word or
Yeah.
yeah. Yeah, awesome. And that's awesome. So what are like the steps to kind of accepting yourself? Like I kind of want to like leave this interview on like a high note, like just and like some tangible steps. Moms that are listening right now, what's one small step they can make today to accepting themselves?
Honestly, lean into that discomfort that you're feeling. That will allow you to open yourself up to acceptance. From accepting it, you can finally open yourself up to figuring out a way to move past it and understanding, why you are struggling to move forward. And I would like acceptance and really leaning into that is going to be your first step for almost anything, honestly, in life.
Yeah, amazing. Yeah, because I think like we were kind of just saying, in so many years you're kind of taught to avoid certain feelings or
Yeah.
brush it under. We don't have time for that right now. So leaning into it is going to, I feel like, open up so much. And you were talking about grounding techniques, journaling. I think those are all amazing steps to kind of understand yourself better too in those moments.
Yeah. Yeah, definitely.
Awesome. And so I know you kind of mentioned your where people can find you, but one more time, your website and your Instagram and anything else. Yeah.
Sure. My website is www.momafterbaby.com. The Instagram is at mom.afterbaby. And I'm new on TikTok, but if you want to follow me there, it's at momafterbaby.
Awesome. And I always like to end these with one last question and one final question. If you could
Yeah.
have a billboard made today, we could share one tip with moms everywhere. What would you have it say?
I would probably say, and it's going to be so redundant, but lean into your motherhood journey. Like lean into it, feel those feels, and just accept where you are because it's not a bad and it's not a wrong place to be.
hmm I love that. I love that. It's definitely a journey. And I think you have some amazing advice and resources for moms because, like you said, like there's there's so much out there. So it's great to be able to find it in one place and get that support because it can be scary, definitely. So
Yeah, definitely. And I'm super happy that, you invited me to chat here today. It's always nice to have this conversation and get that information out for moms.
yeah, of course. Yeah. Thank you so much for coming on. It was so great talking with you. All right, guys, it's time for our mom tales of the week. And this was a good one. Let me just say this got the moms heated. We asked, tell us a hospital visitor horror story. I saw a thread that asked this a while ago, and there were so many stories. And I was shocked, honestly. And so I thought this was a good one to do today too, because of the interview we just did with Karissa talking about boundaries. It's such a important topic because of things like this. And this is why people have to set boundaries and kind of like, even if you don't, which this sucks, but even if you don't, sometimes there's still people that cross those boundaries. So this, oh my gosh, so many boundaries are crossed in this today. I'm getting heated just talking about these other people's situations. So here we go. I got a few extras in here because there were just too many good ones. Number one, Jessica Wade. I was about to get my epidural when my boyfriend's grandfather and his girlfriend tried coming in the room. They didn't call to ask if they could come or anything. They just showed up. Also, he posted on Facebook that my son was born before I could. No. Oh, that makes me so angry. I didn't know about the Facebook post until after it was deleted. Then when we got home, he randomly showed up saying he was in the neighborhood. We live in a dead-end street in a country 45 minutes from where he lives. He was not just in the neighborhood. Okay, so I could kind of get like a family member saying like, oh, I was just in the neighborhood wanting to stop by. I can kind of get it, but it's still not right. It's still crossing a boundary. But can we start at the beginning? Just trying to come in during an epidural, not asking, not making sure it's okay. And on top of that, not just the grandfather, but the grandfather's girlfriend. What? And then posting, this is a big, big thing. And this happens, you know, we see this just in general, all over with posting boundary, like Facebook boundary posting. I don't know if that was the right order of words, but we see it with posting other people's children without approval, posting announcements before it, when it's not your thing to announce. That stuff just drives me crazy. So I'm sorry that happened to you. I got really heated during that one. I don't even know, like, how, because this is something where you wouldn't expect it. So how can you set a boundary when it's something that you wouldn't expect someone to, you wouldn't expect someone just to show up to the hospital? Guys, this is a PSA. If you are not invited to the labor, do not just show up at the hospital. Don't do it. Just don't do it. Ask when is a good time for you to come see the baby. Maybe it's going to be once they're home. Maybe it's going to be a month after they're home. Whatever it is, you have to respect that boundary. I know most of you guys listening are moms, so you probably get it, but pass it on, pass it on. Okay, number two, Madison. My water broke at 8 a.m. 4 p.m. rolls around and no contractions, so they put me on Pitocin. Contractions are coming on strong now, so it's time for the epidural. Just kidding, it didn't work for me. They tried 7 times between 2 different people. It's now midnight and I'm at a 10, so I start pushing. 3 hours of pushing and she finally comes out. I wanted to do the push in the typical position where the nurse's arms are wrapped under my knees and they are holding my hands so I could pull them. They refused to do that because I looked too strong and they didn't want me to hurt them. Eventually they gave in and I had her out in 3 pushes. What was hours of pushing could have been 3 pushes if they had just listened to what I wanted/needed. I tore and needed stitches. The doctor didn't know my epidural didn't work, so he started to sew me shut with no medicine, and I started screaming. The only time I made noise in my whole labor. It hurt so bad, almost worse than the labor. 7 stitches total. Oh my gosh. So I guess I wouldn't call that a hospital visitor story since they're not visitors, but that is a hospital horror story for sure. That, I mean, first of all, them not respecting what you want in your birth, something that you specifically asked for. And we hear these stories a lot, so that's really disappointing to hear. And then for them to start stitching you without being numbed. And this goes to show, like, you know your body best. You knew what you needed at that time, and you're like, no, I need this other position, and I'm going to get her right out. And sure enough. Okay, number 3, anonymous. My mother-in-law announced my baby's birth before me. No, not again. She took pictures at the hospital and sent them to everyone she knows. I asked her not to post about it, but somehow sending it privately is different. She didn't send us the pictures. Oh my gosh. I had someone on Instagram recently message us and say something very similar where the mother-in-law took pictures of her like right after labor and posted it and like shared it. Not ever seeing the picture, but until like way later and being like, I did not want that picture going out. Just don't announce people's things if it's not yours to announce. If it's only if it's you and it's happening to you. It's not, no, my grandbaby was born. No, it's they need to announce it first. It's so angry. Number 4, Maria. I was breastfeeding my little one under a blanket because my ex's family didn't get the hint that I wanted them out. I'm shy and it was my first time nursing and I didn't want to flash his grandpa, LOL. Well, his family finally decided to leave and lifted up my blanket to say bye to the baby. I was fuming. So you're just over here breastfeeding and they're like, okay, bye. It's cute. What do you think? I'm just holding him under a blanket for my health? What do you even say in that moment? Like, excuse me. Do you mind? You want to just like lift up someone's clothing? Oh my gosh. Number 5, Nisi. My dad's girlfriend at the time came to the hospital to visit me before giving birth and told me to strap in because birth is no joke. All right, I'm going to stop right there. Oh, there's so much more. Don't tell someone, unless they're specifically asking you, like, what can I expect? Or what was it like for you? Or blah, blah, blah. Don't start giving them, like, what it was like for you and saying, like, oh, it was horrible, and giving these horrible horror stories about your own birth. That's not cool. Okay, continue. Strap in because giving birth is no joke. It hurts like hell, so get prepared. Mind you, I was already nervous because I was getting induced at 34 weeks. I just got off a 24-hour infusion to lower my blood pressure and wasn't able to eat that whole time. And I had a mean nurse at the time, so I was already very stressed out. Needless to say, I asked them to leave after she said that. Yeah, I would too. It's already such a stressful situation. Don't go in and tell a mom, like, okay, this is gonna suck. Like, how about some positive encouragement, reinforcement, kind words, see how you can support the mom in labor. It seems like common sense, but it seems like it's not for a lot of people. Okay, number 6, Kristen. My firstborn, pre-pandemic, my mom, who didn't come out for the birth, announced his birth on social media. What is with announcing birth on social media before the mom? And she didn't even come out for the birth, so she wasn't even there. Okay, I'm gonna continue. Okay, deep breaths. Okay. My firstborn pre-pandemic, my mom, who didn't even come out for the birth, announced his birth on social media before me with a photo she screenshotted off our video chat. Oh my gosh. And after pushing 6 hours, my husband's entire side of the family came to visit all at once. No, thank you. His brothers, aunts and uncles, grandma, grandpa, everyone. Just everyone, get in here. Come on. Oh my gosh, no. To me, that sounds like a nightmare. A nightmare. In my most vulnerable state, and everyone's just filling the room. No, thank you. Needless to say, I'm thankful there were restrictions this time around for visitors and a valid excuse for limiting visiting at home. Yes. You will not believe, actually you probably will, you moms will. You will not believe the number of people I've heard that were so grateful for COVID restrictions. Yes, the extreme ones that, you could only bring in, like, or some hospitals wouldn't even let husbands come in or partners come in. I think that was a bit extreme, but ones, were beyond that, like no visitors. A lot of those moms said that was a blessing in disguise. At first it seemed scary, but then they got this really nice time with just their baby and their partner that maybe otherwise would have been overshined by family coming in right away or stressing them out. I've heard this by so many, countless moms that have said was really nice, especially this mom who literally had someone post on social media the announcement before she even did, and it's just a screenshot of a video, so who knows what she posted. And then that looks like at least 1, 2, 3, 4, at least 5 or 6 people come in the room that you were not expecting, and that can be a lot. And I think it's really hard for, women in general tend to be a little bit more people pleasers, and so when it comes to that point, then it's hard to have these boundaries and say, wait a second, I don't feel comfortable with all these people coming in the room. Yes, I love you guys, you're my family or you're my friends, but I want this time with just my partner, or I want this time to just be with my baby right now, and I think the COVID restrictions made it easier for moms to just blame it on that and be like, okay. What does suck, and there was another one I read, and I don't think we're reading hers today, but where she had blamed it on the COVID restrictions, and her hospital actually had opened it up, and the mother-in-law went to the website and was like, well, actually it says here that they're allowed, and she's like, no. So we gotta, you know, it's okay to say no to people. And I've read too, if you talk to your labor and delivery nurse, tell them no visitors, they will be the voice for you. They will tell, or the front desk, they will say no one is allowed. And if you have a hard time, you just be like, I'm sorry, I'm not able to. Okay, enough about that. Number 7, Alexandra. I was stuck in the hospital for over a week after my emergency C-section because I had so many issues. Baby was fine. My mother-in-law wanted to come see us, and I agreed. However, she brings my husband's 13-year-old nephew without asking. And I'm laying in bed naked, trying to feed my baby while getting a blood transfusion and feeling shitty as they walk in. I was so angry. Oh my gosh, I am so angry for you. Why would your mother-in-law think it's appropriate to bring your 13-year-old nephew in the room? It doesn't matter actually who it is. It could be anyone. But to bring someone unannounced and not ask, so disrespectful. The lack of respect is mind-boggling. Okay, number 8, anonymous. My father brought his brand new girlfriend that I had never met before to meet the baby for the first time. We don't know. We don't want new people. Like, I think people think of it as this people think of it selfishly. Like they're like, oh, it's my, you know, like grandbaby or my niece, my nephew, but it's that person's child first. And that comes first. And what they want comes first, not what you want. And the baby's not here to be like oohed and awed over. It's still a human. It needs its space and it needs respect. You know, you can't just, it's not just to like come in and like, you know, stare at it. You don't even know this baby or this family. Whatever. Okay. 9, Emerson. I went to the doctor several times saying I had a bladder infection. He didn't believe me. Ended up on the, okay. Let me just do that again. Oh, I don't know why it's flashing at me. Okay. Number 9, Emerson. I went to the doctor several times saying I had a bladder infection. He didn't believe me. Ended up on my bathroom floor screaming in pain because it traveled to my kidneys. Was sent to labor and delivery twice. I was about 26 weeks for an NST and medication. They had to give me morphine to help with the pain. Had he listened to me, it wouldn't have progressed to a kidney infection. This makes me so angry for you. The fact that he was so negligent of your feelings and what you're telling him, like, you know your body best. And I've heard this time and time again, you have to trust your own instincts. If one doctor says no, you got to find another. If you know your body, that's horrible. Gosh. Okay. 10, anonymous. I told my mom she could come see the baby while I was still in the hospital. And she brought her boyfriend. Like I hadn't approved that. Again, with the bringing the guests. No, people. That's just like that other one. That's so disrespectful. So I think we've learned a lot here today, guys. Don't go to a hospital to visit someone unless you are invited. Don't just show up at someone's house, again, unless you are invited. If you are visiting a mom after she had her baby, bring a gift for the baby, bring food for the mom, bring a gift for the mom. If you are not invited, leave it on the doorstep, send a text, hey, I left food on your doorstep, see you later. Boundaries, people. Even if we don't understand their boundary, we can't just show up, especially with a newborn baby. It's not for us to decide what works best for us. It's for us to go through the mom and find out what works for her. Well, I'm heated after this. I don't know about you guys, so I need to cool down. Thank you everyone for sharing your hospital visitor horror stories. There were lots. So if you have more you want to share them on our Facebook page, our Instagram page, our Facebook group, and we can just share and get heated together and see how we can make a change and help people understand boundaries a little bit better. And a boundary is not a rude thing. It is protecting you. So if you're currently pregnant and you're like, this is actually what I picture for my birth. I don't want anyone there, or I don't want any visitors at home after. You have the right to those boundaries. You have every right. Don't believe what people tell you if they're like, oh, but I have to come, or just letting them show up. No, you have a right to your boundaries. That's all I'm going to say. I think I'm making this way too long. All right, thanks for tuning in, guys, and I'll see you next week. Thank you so much for watching this episode. But before you go, make sure you like, subscribe, and ring that bell so you get notified of future episodes. We release new episodes every single Wednesday. See you next week.